Just like thermodynamics, diversity, equity, and inclusion is not as simple as it seems. Content warning, racism. So Professor Mueller states about racism, he compares it to adding amphiphilic molecules to create a system into a stable emulsion, and says, this suggests a rather foolproof way to eliminate racism and intolerance among divided societies. It is essential to maximize the number of people that can be accepted by both conflicting groups, thus minimizing the formation of distinct phases. And then he turns to South American societies, which are highly mixed, as an example of such societies that do not see racism. However, let's take the case study of Brazil. This is a lot of text, so we'll go to the TLDR. Brazil was one of the last countries to abolish slavery. At the time, the population was mostly black or mixed race. Then, officials explicitly encouraged European immigration and then blocked Chinese and African immigration, and tried to whiten the population by encouraging white immigrants to have children with the population of color so that their children would then be more white. Many Brazilians today identify as white, even if they do have African and/or indigenous ancestry. This is partially because appearance defines their classification and treatment in society. Most Brazilians, regardless of race, acknowledge that there is racial prejudice and discrimination. There's also a lot of racial inequality, especially with human rights abuses and income. So there's also been more recent racial tensions. Backdrop for this, Brazil has the largest African descendant population outside of Africa. Black Brazilians, though, make up less than 20% of the Brazilian Congress and are less than 5% of the Brazilian Fortune 500. However, at the same time, they are 75% of civilian and police murder victims and lose their jobs at higher rates and earn 57% that white counterparts do. And then President Bolsonaro introduced an anti-crime bill with a self-defense provision for officers, which has been used to target Black Brazilians and has been deemed a death policy. So how does this relate to thermodynamics? Here we have an equilibrium equation and fugacity when accounting for deviation from reference behavior. In this case, we can assume that being white is the reference behavior, and so greater deviations from whiteness and greater unideal solutions, so the less homogeneous that these solutions are, with activities the coefficient is not equal to 1, affects the overall equilibrium. People have way too many characteristics to ever be homogeneous, and thus societies cannot be ideal solutions. Some key takeaways: even in highly mixed societies, Black folks, Asian folks, non-white folks, indigenous folks are still discriminated against. Homogeneity in societies doesn't make racism go away because there's no such thing, and mixed children are not the solution to racism. One example of this is colorism, which is today a product of racism and colonialism, and determines how people are treated even among those who are of the same race. And what's the reason for this? Professor Mueller got this right. There is a high resistance to change, and part of this resistance to change is internalized racism and the difficulty in confronting it. He says, it takes a while for society to move from one state to another. And this is true among societies. And this is true not only in thermodynamics, but also, as he suggests, among societies. And so, because of this, it takes a clear driving force, an external pressure that can't just be solved by mixing. It must be solved by clear, concise action and continuous growth. Here are some of my references.